And God gives us that in us, that love of justice, that righteous anger. It's really good. Problem is, it goes all other places. And as soon as it rises up, the flesh is like, I got this, move. I'll do it for you. Starts quoting scriptures, like, faith without action's dead. Come here, and I'll pray for you. Smith Wigglesworth had it right. He did. But we're talking this morning about serving. We hear a lot about honour and about service and serving others, and I think there's a lot of times we don't really get it. We don't understand the dynamics of it and what it's actually for. And it's something that God's been talking to me about a lot lately, because there's a lot being said about it. There's a lot being said about honour. There's a lot being said about serving others. And I just kept thinking, we're missing something. We're missing something here. There's a dynamic missing. There's an element missing to it. And the prophetic word over the season was that honour would be our warfare. And the only way that honour can be warfare, and the way it works, is that I will honour Pastor Clara so fiercely that I will only see what God has positioned her as and what he designed her as. I will not allow the enemy to pull me into a rhetoric of, well, look at the way she looked at me and how she spoke to me, and that's not. I would have to come out of kingdom mindset, and I would have to come down to an earthly level to engage in that. So for me, honour is the highest warfare, because you can't get in to cause division there. Not because we're best friends, not because we agree. We do agree sometimes. Not because we get on all the time and we're best friends, because the problem is Pastor Clara and I are both pretty sharp in a lot of ways. So we get on all right, because and then it's done. That's it. We speak the same language. It's called but that works for me. And we have to learn that it doesn't work for everybody. But my honour is, regardless of how it's not about feelings, it's not about if we're friends, it's not about if we get on together, it's not about if we agree, but I have to see her as God sees her. I'm using you as an example because you're pretty safe. But I have to see what God sees. And if Pastor Clara's whatever is not aligning with that, do I gurn about it, or do I say, God, I just want to speak blessing and honour over her, that she comes into alignment with what you're doing? That's serving. That's how we serve. That's how we use honour as a weapon. We stay out of the flesh with it, because if we go into that, he said, she said, how everyone made you feel, it's a massive door for the enemy. He can only get in on a flesh level. So it's staying out of that. So God brought me to John 13. And it's basically, Jesus knows the betrayal's coming. He knows. He says, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father. The devil had already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot to betray him. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. So the context there is, Jesus knew that there was somebody in his crowd, in his team, in his circle, was standing with a knife ready. He knew it had been done. He knew the decision had been made. He also knew who he was and where he had come from, and he knew where he was going. So not only did he know who was around him, but he knew where he stood in terms of kingdom and what his purpose was. And what he chose to do to show that and to walk that out was to serve. He chose to wash the feet of the disciples. And it wasn't a case of just washing their feet. Something else was happening there. There was another dynamic at play. He was demonstrating outwardly his inner posture of heart, which was full submission and sacrifice. It was a giving out. It was radiator. It was pouring out. So in order for Jesus to be in that slipstream, he needed to step into it. So if you think of a house with different rooms, to be served, to give service, you go into your room that's for serving. What Jesus was doing here wasn't just washing feet. He was putting himself in a position of serving. His entire self, all of him went to serve. His body served. so that his spirit could get into that. It's like a warm-up almost, for want of a better phrase. He was positioning himself for service. And it changed the entire dynamic. It put him in a place of peace. It put him in the zone. We talk about getting into the zone for something. It was only in this position, standing fully as a servant, that he could do what he did. Because that act of sacrifice on the cross was a service. It was serving mankind. It was bigger than we could ever think or imagine. We step into a cycle. When you serve, we step into a cycle of service. You kind of, it's almost like a whirlpool. It's hard to get out of. It's a bit daunting to get into, but it's hard to get out of, because what goes around comes around. What you reap, you sow. What you sow, you reap. And actually the other way around as well. It just keeps going round in a cycle. So Jesus was getting into this cycle of pouring out when he was doing that. Serving places us in a position of power and authority, because it aligns us directly under God. In order for me to be under God, I have to do what God asks me to do, and it's serving. It's just natural. It just happens when you step under that. If I stand under a waterfall, I am going to get the waterfall on my head. But that's where I have to go to serve. That's the way that works. And when others are constantly serving you and you're not serving anybody, you end up waiting around a lot. You lose power, you lose authority, and there's a dependence created that's unhealthy. Serving is between you and God, regardless of who else it might involve, what it looks like here. It's always between you and God. Serving's this way. And we often see it going that way. So if God asks me to do something for Maggie, that's really nothing to do with Maggie. That's between me and God. So I'll go and do whatever God's asked me to do. It's also nothing to do. I can change the dynamic, and I can be like, hey Maggie, look what I did for you. Look what I did for you, Maggie. Do you know what I did for Maggie? Here, everybody needs to see what I did for Maggie. And I have switched from this dynamic to this dynamic. I have switched from following God, which initially I did, and I followed God and I did what God asked me to do. But then what I did is I stepped back out of that slipstream and went looking for man's approval, which automatically takes me out of a blessing, because I've had to disengage from that slipstream to go back into this one. So it doesn't work. No matter what God asks you to do, no matter what your service is, it's always you and God, God and you. I don't ever expect anything to come back from that level. It'll always come back from God. It'll come back from the source that told me to go in the first place. And you can serve and be served at the same time. Like I said, it's a cycle, and it's a posture of heart that leads to kingdom. You go into this slipstream. It's a direction, it's a choice, it's a lifestyle. It's something that you go into. If we were going to Bangor, we would all go on that, well, I would go Sydenham bypass. And everybody on that road's going the same direction. If somebody came the wrong direction on that road, there'd be a car crash. So we all go the same way. Have you ever driven in, if you're in a smaller car, get in, dipped in behind a lorry? If I was low on fuel, I would have tucked in behind a lorry, because it would have pulled me on a slipstream. Granda told me that. Tuck in behind a lorry. It was a good idea, save fuel. But you go into this slipstream. You're going the same way. You'll find that you also attract others that are going the same way, and that have that same posture of heart. You see, who you club with, you'll become like. If you're on fire, like totally on fire, and you spend all of your time with people who are not, you'll dilute. But also, if you tuck in with people who are on fire, it'll get you going as well, which is why it tells us to meet together. Genesis 39 talks about Joseph. We were talking about him last week. And it says that he succeeded in everything he did because God's hand was on him. But Joseph was a servant. He served. He was in that slipstream. He couldn't help it but be blessed. He couldn't help it but be promoted because he had slipped into this slipstream. If I go onto the motorway and I am going that direction, I can't get off the motorway I need to wait for an exit. I need to wait till I have an opportunity to get off, but you just can't stop and turn around. So we're getting into this slipstream. And no matter what Joseph did, because Joseph was arrogant, he had a lot to learn, like most of us, a lot to learn. But he succeeded at everything, because regardless of his personality or how he thought about things or what he did, God's hand was on him, and he went into that obedience. He did what God asked him to do, which then made this cycle of obedience and blessing. It just happened. Colossians 3, verse 23 to 24 actually tells us how to do that, and it's talking about doing everything for the Lord. So no matter what you do, when I say serving, I'm not saying you have to come and do a job for the church. Serving is a posture of heart. It's a lifestyle. It's for lots of different people. Remember, it's always between you and God. So God's not just going to put you one place. It could be doing your job. It could be in work. It could be talking to somebody. It's not always going to be one thing. But we serve God because he loves us. If we do it all for him, again, it's that dynamic. It's keeping the dynamic between you and God. Don't go and do something for somebody if you want them to recognise you. Don't go and serve somebody so that you can get something back, because that picture to me is sitting the way a dog would sit at the table and hope for crumbs. That's not who we are. Yeah. Sons of a king, I'm at the table. I sit at the table. And we can never see the full outworking of God's plan for kingdom purpose. We see a wee bit, and it absolutely blows our minds. So again, something that's as simple as it might seem like a small act to you, but it'll come back round. We were moving furniture yesterday, and I have my granda's desk, and the top of it comes off. And when we lifted the top of it off, there was an envelope sitting with my name on it, trapped between the column and the desk. Now, I don't know, many years that's been sat there. And I opened it, and it was a note from somebody from years ago that said what I needed yesterday. The front of it said, "Courage, dear heart." And these little things. Somebody was told to give me that card, and they wrote in it as well years ago, and I was given it, and it was nice at the time. I don't even remember getting it. But I found it yesterday, and it started this series of conversations between me and God yesterday, and brought me to a place where I needed to be, all from one thing, one act of service that was from years ago. It doesn't just work once. It's not just for the moment. It'll keep coming back, and it'll have a ripple effect, because you'll talk to somebody about it. It'll ignite something in them. Remember, we're trying to do forest fires here, and it just happens automatically, because too often we look at the earthly action and the dynamics. I did that for her, and she did nothing back. And what? If you are doing something for what you'll get out of it, don't bother. Don't do it. Do not do something for somebody unless you're doing it with the right motives. It says to give with a cheerful heart. That means, see, if you have an ulterior motive, don't do it. Don't give somebody something laced with flesh. Don't do it. Just pick something else to do with your day. Because it's between me and God. Which is the same as if I give something with an ulterior motive, or do something with an ulterior motive. Who's going to pull me on it? God's going to say, "What was that for? Sorry." See, I'll do what God asks me to do. Not all the time. I'm not like super obedient. But I only give if God asks me to give. And I give exactly how he asks me to give. And I love that. I love that he'll say, "Get this, this, and this. Put it together and give it to." Or, "Can you pray for this, this, and this for such?" I love that, because it's such a blessing to be able to serve. And it's me and God. It's just me and him. It feels like we're in a secret club and we can do all these things. And it's just me and him, because it says what happens in secret, he sees in secret. And it actually went a bit wrong the other day, because I didn't listen to him, and I was taking a friend out for belated lunch for her birthday. And I thought last minute, of that wee gift for her, and I wasn't going to give it to her. It was one of them Amazon ones where I thought it was one of them ready packaged friends for a female friend, or gifts for a female friend. And I thought, I'll just get it. And I says, look, this isn't your present. It's just a wee opening. Never say that again. So I was like, just something for you to open, because the gift was lunch. We were going for lunch to spend time together. So I hadn't checked it, I hadn't looked at it, and usually God's really specific with me, and I, getting things from different places or putting something together. So that night I get a text from her saying, the candle gave me a laugh. And I thought, oh, there's a candle in it? Okay. I was like, what happened with the candle? I gifted this person a candle that said, our friendship is like this candle. If you forget me, I'll burn your house down. And I was like, this is not somebody that you would say that to. This is somebody I hold in high esteem and great honour. And I was like, I don't even know how to answer this. I am so sorry. Now, everybody saw the funny side and it was okay, but I threatened to burn a leader's house down in this country. And I was like, note to self. God's like, well, did I tell you to buy that box? I was like, no. So, thank God she's a sense of humour. How often have we went and done something that we weren't really supposed to do but seemed a good idea at the time? My mum says in my gravestone she was going to get, seemed a good idea, or I didn't think. That was my statement my whole life, but I didn't see it going that way. How often have you done something that you didn't think was a big deal and it turned into a massive deal and you were like, this has gone really, really badly? I have a gift. So it's out of experience that I link to what God tells me to do. Even if I really wanted to be lovely and do lots of things, I don't do it because I don't know what's going on there. And I know that one small action has a huge ripple effect. So I only do it God tells me to, not because I'm super holy, but because my track record is rife of stuff that's just gone wild. I'm not allowed in Tesco anymore. That's another story. I am allowed supervised. I'm allowed to go supervised. I know. I just broke my elbow walking into a pole. It wasn't even good. It wasn't even a good story. Did you fall? I wish. Because then I could say I fell and people would understand. But no, just me. And I love these conversations I have with God, because even after I did that, I was like, who does that? Who do you know that has walked into a pole this shape? As my brother said, what'd you do at 50 miles an hour? But I love this relationship that I have. Colossians 3 tells me that my inheritance comes from God and that any wrongdoer will be paid back. So again, once I do, it's the same with a prophetic word. When you give a prophetic word, you release that word and then it's none of your business anymore. You don't follow it up. You don't go to see if they've done it. None of your business. God asks you to do something, you do it. Imagine if you got a delivery from Amazon and the Amazon man came into your house and sat and watched you open it. And then be like, right, you need to use it now. You using it? And then he comes back the next day, you used that yet? Who was that for? Did you do what you were supposed to do? It'd be weird, but we do it all the time. We give a word and we follow it up. We give somebody advice and we think, we take it so terribly if they don't take our advice. And even worse, if they don't take our advice and it goes the wrong shape, there's a bit of a, well, how did that work out for you? We have this, and that all of that comes under this dynamic between me and you, between people. It's a flesh level, it's a person level. It doesn't work. It's not kingdom. It just doesn't work. We have to be linked under God, because what I do for him, it's his responsibility to, number one, provide me with what I require to do it, but also to give me my debrief. It's nothing to do with me, and I serve God and walk in obedience. If I get any negativity or misrepresentation, I had a couple of conversations this week with people where we have been misrepresented in circles where we shouldn't have been. And we had this really good, it's good to have good, healthy, open conversations. And these two people had come and chatted to me this week, and we had talked about misrepresentation. Now, who copes well with misrepresentation in here? When somebody says something about you, it's not true. We have a thing in us, don't we? Like a self-protecting, And I have all of these. If you think of children's building blocks, we have this many a day. And they are time, their energy, their words, they're all of these things. Now, if this person has misrepresented me, and bad news travels faster, lies travel faster than truth, it just does. And everybody jumps in the bandwagon, they're like, oh my goodness, that's so true, because one time, so we have all of these blocks. Now, I could bless so many people and do so much for God with these blocks. I could give time there. I could pray this here. I could, really go into intercession with that block. I have all of these things. Now, I could take all of those blocks and throw it at the misrepresentation, and it might start to dent it or start to crack it. I'll never have enough blocks to turn that. I could waste days, weeks, months, years of my life trying to convince somebody that I am not what somebody else said I was. As I've said before, Jesus preached his first sermon and tried to throw him off a cliff. Imagine getting to heaven and somebody saying, oh, here we are in heaven, we died at the same time, and God saying to you, were you in that crowd that tried to throw my son off a cliff? I didn't know who he was. No, but such and such had told me that they were terrible. Here's a great way to do that. Don't listen and walk away. When somebody starts talking to you about somebody else, don't listen and walk away, because you're going to end up using your blocks, and if you lie with the pigs, you're going to get covered in dirt. You will find that when you're trying to serve God, people will come in with misrepresentation. She just did that because, he just did that because. All of that is this dynamic. All of that is men between men, women between women. That's all that way. You need to step out of it. And this is the hard part, is taking a step back out of that dynamic, because it's a slipstream as well and you get caught in it. Taking a step back and saying, God, I'm taking my hands off this. I can't change this. I don't like it. I find it hurtful. But I need to link up into you. And usually what he'll do is he'll give you something else to go and do and take you out of it. The same as if something spills or gets a mess in our house. Kids try and fix it, and usually it's slime and it makes it worse. And I just be like, right, just go and I'll deal with this. So they get sent to do something else and I clean it up. That's what God does for us, because he needs us in that slipstream. He needs us in that serving mindset. He needs us in the posture of heart. And the enemy's going to throw stuff at us, try and pull at our heartstrings, try and wound us and lock us into that flesh level, into that dynamic side by side. We can't do that. We've no time for it anymore. We're right at the edge. We're kingdom. We're on our way. There's things happening. God's moving. There's people that need prayer, people that need intercession. I don't have time to sit and try and convince somebody that is irrelevant to my life that I'm not that kind of person. If you don't know my heart, fine. God knows my heart. That's why David said, test my heart and my motives. In Psalms, he always says, God, you need to check me out. We need that accountability. How often do we start something all set for change, and at the first setback or negative response, we stop? I'm going to do this. That's me. From tomorrow, I'm going to serve. I'm going to talk to God every morning. I'm going to serve, and I'm going to do all these things that God asks me to do, which isn't always giving things or finances. It can be time. It can be prayer. Your servant could be cleaning your house. Your servant could be walking a circle around somewhere where you live, just praying. And it doesn't need to be you arms in the air shouting and praying out loud. God just might need you just to take that ground quietly. But we can start and get ourselves all wound up, and as soon as somebody says something, I can nearly guarantee you, when you step into that and you make a decision to follow God, it'll come. Why do we have Psalm 91? Why is it there? Because God knows the heart of man. Jesus said, you don't need to tell me not to trust him. I know what's in man's heart. Yet funny, he was able to love without trusting. We need to learn how to find that line. Serve with your gifts and serve with your words. Step into a dynamic where you're in alignment with God's will for you. Do you know, when we get into that slipstream and into that dynamic where we're following what God tells us to do, and too often we only ask God what he wants for our lives, like as a big picture, but we need to say, what do you want me to do today? And you'll just feel, maybe I should do this. And if you don't know what it is, just start serving. Start serving. I was sitting there one day, we'd done worship, and I was feeling a bit ropey, I think. And I'd sat down, and I said to God, oh, I'd love a cup of tea. I know that's ridiculous, but I just sat down and I said, God, I'd love a cup of tea. And somebody tapped me on the shoulder. It was Kathy. She says, the Holy Spirit said I'd to make you a cup of tea. I'm like, don't even talk to me about miracles or wanting the world changed. My God knows me and he loves me. You can't convince me Jesus doesn't love me. I got a cup of tea in the middle of church. I was brave because you were speaking. I was brave. She served God because God said to Kathy, Susie would really like a cup of tea. Away and grab her one. It wasn't a big spiritual thing. It wasn't saving the world. It wasn't going out and winning souls, which is all wonderful. But just aim for what God's given in you. Just do what's your gift and what do you like to do? That's the first question. What do you like to do? Because it says God gives us the desires of our heart. That doesn't mean we really want something and God gives it to us. It says that God places within us desires that will lead us to him so that we can then function on the perfect level that he's designed us to. Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Your heart posture will determine your slipstream in the road you're on, which is why the enemy comes in like fly kicking somebody off a moped. Just boots you off that wee slipstream you're in when you're wanting to do something. And this is where we have to stop lying there licking our wounds, get up, shake it off and say, who are you talking to? We do it out there. We need to not lose everything that we have on the street when we come into church, because some of it's really handy. Who are you talking to? Do you know who I am? Or my favourite one, do you know who my dad is? Because he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He created the world. He breathed life into a form and humanity was born. People saw me the way God sees me. If you saw each other, especially the people that are annoying the life clean out of you, especially the people that you're thinking, oh my goodness, here we go. What does God see? We did this in the leadership day. We had boxes of sand and you had to dig in the sand and pick all the jewels out. That's what we should be doing with each other. Stop waiting for people to be perfect and good before you'll give them a compliment. Stop waiting until you see something. The world says, oh, I'll believe it when I see it. God says, if you believe it, you'll see it. Start speaking into each other. Serve God by speaking good and life into each other. I don't care if you see it. Say it. It's the same as the world says, you know, you give to get, you give away to get. That's not what it is. You get so you can give. 2 Corinthians 9 talks about God says he will enrich you in every way so you can be generous on every occasion. And we will do that quicker with money and time than we will with mood, with opinion, with emotions. Now, emotions are wild. They're powerful for a reason. They're supposed to motivate you towards God. They're terrible decision makers. But we're told to get into that slipstream and to be where God can bless us and work with us and use us. We're like, oh Lord, use me, use me, use me. And then he'll tell us to do something. You'll be like, no, use me though. Use me better than that. Go and cut the grass. What? No, Lord. I want to do something kingdom. Cut the grass. That's kingdom. Take ownership of your land. Take ownership of your home. Stand in authority. You need to be in the same in the house as outside the house. In Luke 6, I love this. Verse 37, judge not and you'll not be judged. Condemn not and you'll not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. It's talking about if you want to judge somebody, go into the room of the house that says judgment on the door. But we heads up when you go in there, all your judgments are waiting on you because that's all that's in there. You go